Jo. So we're doing these
Hi.
Lockdown Diaries, and we're catching up with people in different circumstances and different places. This time we're catching up with yourself. You're an author and journalist based in Amsterdam. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Jo, you were saying just before we started recording that Holland went into lockdown before the UK. So can you just take us back to that time?
Yeah.
What measures were announced and what was the vibe like? What was the feeling?
Well, okay, so I don't actually live in Amsterdam. I really wish I did. I live in a little village up north, but I work in Amsterdam, so
Okay.
I commute. But I was in Amsterdam at a job interview
Okay.
for my third kind of interview on the Wednesday, on the 11th, and there was definitely a vibe in the air. People were talking about it. People were talking about the virus, but it was still that kind of nobody really knows what's going on atmosphere. I actually went out and had lunch on the canal, like proper Amsterdam vibes, and it was quieter. It was definitely quieter, and people were talking about it. That was the Wednesday. On the Friday, it was lockdown. So it felt that sudden. So that was the 13th of March. And I'm sure we'll go into this, but the lockdown, when I say lockdown, it's kind of the Dutch lockdown has been a lot more lenient than the UK.
Okay.
But yeah,
so what did that mean? Obviously, it's known as being Amsterdam in particular is known as being a super liberal city. What did lockdown mean then? Was the police and army on the streets or anything, or?
Oh God, no. Brilliantly, when they announced, so I think it was like Friday night at midnight on the 13th. They were shutting. I might get this wrong, but it was around there. They were shutting all the shops, all the non-essential shops and stuff. But they announced that they were going to shut all the coffee shops,
okay,
and the brothels, the sex worker shops, and there were queues a mile long outside the coffee shops, just like people just getting their weed in, like you would not believe, like just chaos at the weed shops. And that was kind of the image that I remember of going into lockdown, because everyone was passing these joke pictures around, like the Dutch have got their priorities right kind of thing. And then schools, then basically initially lockdown was schools, universities, everybody who can work from home does work from home. Restricted public transport. But when I say it was more lenient, you could always still see 3 additional people in your house.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever your household was, you can have 3 additional people. And I think you could be with 3 additional people outside without getting fined. But they shut down, like, events started at 100 people, then 50 people, and then it was no events. But yeah, so that was kind of the initial start.
So how did that impact you then? You were at a job interview, so is that just up in the air now?
Well, I was actually meant to get the call on the Friday, and so I got the call on the Friday saying, everything's on pause now, obviously, because we're going in lockdown and we don't know what's happening. So I was crawling to the finishing line and then just booted out. But I'm freelance anyway, and I've been freelance for 10 years. So this was actually a new thing for me, going for a permanent job. And so it wasn't actually a change in my life at all, not getting it, because I just carried on being freelance. But I mean, the good news for me is they've now just rung me and taking me on for 3 days a week.
Hey!
So,
Nice.
So I had a lot of my work is for UK magazines and websites, and that all kind of just stopped because a lot of the magazines had to stop their print editions and they put staff on furlough, and obviously less inclined to hire freelancers when they've got, you know, staff who need the work. So yeah, it's been a quiet 5 weeks.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel like this week everyone's just starting to get a little bit of coronavirus fatigue. And I don't just mean, I mean a little bit of everything. I mean, not seeing the families, you know, just reading about it, even memes. You know, give us something else, please. You know what I mean?
Are you bored of memes?
Bored of coronavirus memes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think I felt weird in that, so the Netherlands, we can now see 10 people, or it's coming in soon that you're allowed to have groups of 10. And also it was my birthday last weekend and I went on a mini break and that's allowed, like, and I find that there's, so kind of when I was talking to my friends at first, I was like, oh my God, isn't this great? Because this is happening in the Netherlands and I can see people and I can go away. That means it will be happening for you guys soon, blah, blah, blah. And that was 2 weeks ago. And then now I am feeling slightly about it, like on Instagram or posting anything, like I'm off out to see my mates, guys, because you guys aren't still off to see your mates.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's interesting as well. Like the you've got what Boris said on what he didn't say, what he kind of said on Sunday.
Who knows?
You can go anywhere or in the UK all day as long as it's your household. But then in the following 24 and 48 hours, all these other places which people are likely to go to, especially this time of year, your Cornwalls and Wales, for example, they all come out saying, "You're not coming here." You know, I don't know if you've seen, but Visit Wales put this brilliant picture on Instagram where it's like a picture of this railway and it just said later. So like Visit Wales later, you know, don't be coming now. All the attractions are closed, all the parks are closed, do not come here. So it's funny, isn't it? You know, and that's going to go on for a long time as each country's at a different stage and as the second waves and all this business.
Yeah, I do find that like you say, the different stages, it's quite, because you guys, I imagine, are hugely now getting fatigued, lockdown fatigue. Whereas I feel like I had lockdown lasted 7 weeks or so, and now we're coming out of it and I see the ray of hope and I feel much more positive. And I would quite, one of my friends who left Amsterdam to go back to where she's from in York is now coming back. Like, she's coming back this weekend, and I just feel like, I want people to come back. Whereas where I used to live in Margate, all my friends in Margate are like, no one's coming here. Yeah, Margate's terrified of the tourist rush and all this. So yeah, it's tense. Weird time.
I saw a piece on, there was a flight from Edinburgh to Amsterdam on Sunday. I don't know if you've seen this KLM flight, and it was chocker. Like, previously the flights had still been ongoing, hadn't they, some of them, especially from capital city to capital city, etc. And but obviously immediately, it must have been Sunday night, immediately after Boris's speech, they've thought, the airlines have thought, sound, let's cash in, let's open the turnstiles. And there was a picture of the flight and it was full. And there was reports, people coughing on each other and all that. And it's a funny thing, that, because you've got a flight going from Scotland where there's one set of rules, but it's going to land in Amsterdam where there's another set of rules. So you're going to have this for a long time, aren't you?
Yeah. But as far as I'm aware, oh my God, this is going to make me, I'm going to Google this after we get offline and I'll realise I'm totally wrong. But as far as I'm aware, you don't have to go in quarantine or anything as soon as you land in Holland. I think it's have a nice time. I really do. So that might be wrong.
It's great Holland, isn't it? Jesus.
I mean, I bloody love it here. It's pretty nice. It's all right.
Sorry, Joe.
Oh,
Just
God.
wondering if you what you perceive the differences in reaction from Dutch people, particularly around near Amsterdam where you live, and then people back home. Because I know it's generalising, but me and Adam have spoken a lot about sort of Sweden, where rightly or wrongly they had a much more relaxed approach than even in Holland. And obviously here they belatedly went into quite a severe lockdown. Italy, a very severe lockdown. But in some of those countries, people were very kind of observant of it. And I think they were here as well, up until what Adam was saying. We kind of feel like we've reached the point where that civil obedience is beginning to erode, and it could yet result in more problems down the line. But how has it been in Holland? What are people, how do they respond to authorities saying stop?
I've discussed this with a lot of my friends as well, because I find the cultural like aspect of it super interesting. The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte said in a statement, I believe, the Dutch are a sensible people. We don't need to lock them down, essentially. And I feel like that kind of sums it up. There's a real down-to-earthness about the Dutch. I'm massively generalising here, but I do feel, this is my massive cultural stereotype, but I mean it in the most positive way, is that there's a real just kind of get on with it attitude. And so I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel the Dutch have definitely had a more lenient lockdown, and it seems to have worked. I've spoken to my friends who are living all over the country before I spoke to you guys, just saying, have you guys had any trouble with being out exercising and people shouting at you about keeping your distance, or people telling you off for being outside, or people doing this and this? And no one's had any of it here. And my friends who live in near central Amsterdam were saying that everybody's very relaxed, chilled out. Nobody.
I wonder why.
I mean, no one can tell why, but yeah, it seems much more laid back. It seems much more relaxed, and it just seems like people, this is the situation, everybody's dealing with it. I'm sure there are other parts of the country and places where it's not like that, though. So I don't, you know, it feels much calmer. And I'm saying that from reading the Dutch news in English that I get, and from the UK news, is like, all right, disaster, but we're all dealing with it. You know, like, and that's it. It really does feel like that. I mean, how do you guys hear anything about the Netherlands in England?
You've got to look for it, because
Yeah.
I feel like at the very start of this, I told you before, you know, me and my wife had the virus just before we went to lockdown on the 23rd of March. And I feel like the first couple of weeks, I don't know about you, Greg, there was a real togetherness, and there was, I felt like a real sense of community. I've just moved house, so I really benefited from it, because I got to know the house, got to know the neighbours, which I wouldn't have normally done. And I feel like that was really the case. But I almost feel like the last couple of weeks in particular, with the streaming negativity towards the government and stuff, isn't really helpful in terms of like the energy of the people. It's just, there's a lot of negativity coming out, and the Guardian actually are doing a wonderful thing on Instagram. They're posting like positivity. I think it's every day or every couple of days, with some great stories, and some of the images that have come out as well. There's a guy we had on the podcast a few months ago called Billy Moore, right? And he was in this film based on his life, where he'd spent time in a prison in Thailand and whatnot. And he's just a really nice guy. He's got a brother who's autistic, and I think he lived with him up until recently. But Billy is now, got a partner, and he's had a baby and stuff. Anyway, their uncle died recently, and they had the funeral yesterday. And there's this really powerful image. We'll pop it up when the podcast goes out. And it's Billy stood there against like this fence 2 meters apart from his brother, and his brother's crying his eyes out, and Billy's just sort of looking at him. And I'm getting goosebumps standing about it now. It's like, it's really, really powerful. Heartbreaking, but really, really powerful.
I don't know. Yeah, when lockdown started, I was only following UK news, and so I was kind of obeying the UK, what the UK was doing, and I really felt like I was in England. And so even though you could go out the house in the Netherlands, I was just like locking in and all of this. I didn't hoard toilet roll or anything, but it was like pretty tense. And I still feel that way, and to a degree, very invested in what the UK is doing. And I do feel this kind of, I feel sad. I feel really sad about the UK. I feel like the situation is pretty grim over there. And like that, what you've just described, it just feels really, I just hope it gets better. I feel like it needs to get better because I feel like the Netherlands I feel like we're coming out, but the UK is my home. And I don't know, it's a weird, I feel a bit torn.
Is there not a worry there, Jo, about coming out? You come out earlier. There's a lot of anxiety, about his message, whatever stay alert means. I don't know what that means, but this message that's coming out now, there's some divides going on, but I certainly feel there's a lot of anxiety out there about going back and then a potential second wave. Is there anything like that in Holland?
Not that I've come across. This is going to sound really bad. It's very laid back here. Like, as in, everyone's taking it seriously. When I say it's laid back, I don't mean everyone's down the pub having a drink. I mean, people are keeping to the rules, but the rules are, you can see 3 people, or you could, like, soon you can see 10. So we are going to visit people. We are, when I start this job and I'm going to do 3 days a week, I'm going into the office.
Oh, wow.
So it feels quite normal. So I don't know, that it feels quite, the difference is quite extreme. And we went to an Airbnb last weekend and went cycling and had a coffee. I feel really bad saying it.
No, it's just mad how different it seems, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's like, the concept of doing that for now feels so remote. Whether it is or not, it's certainly how it feels. Would you agree, Ad?
Yeah, absolutely. But look, there's a thing here where everyone's so critical of the government now, and rightly or wrongly. I mean, we can all kind of agree that there's been loads of mistakes. There's been a lot of ambiguity this week in particular, and that's dangerous in this time.
Yeah.
And you probably needed to. A lot of cities, I know here in Liverpool, and friends I've spoken to who live across the UK, a lot of cities had abandoned lockdown anyway last week because the weather was so nice here.
Yeah.
So, and going into the city on Saturday, you just got the sense that it was, in certain areas, it was abandoned anyway. So I felt like, and Greg and I, we did an episode of this on Sunday, we felt like that was the real time for Boris to come out and say, guys, look, we've got this far, we've done 7 weeks, we've done the hard bit. If you needed a haircut, you've probably got one by now. Sorry, Greg. If you missed the gym, you've probably got this routine at home where you've got dumbbells, you've got kettlebells, or you've got a pull-up bar. All these things, you're cooking more, you're spending more time with your kids, etc., etc.
Yeah.
We've done that now, so let's just carry on for another couple of weeks. But he just threw it out the window by, delivering this strange, muddled message to stay alert. And as an employer, I've spent the last couple of days trying to interpret that.
Yeah,
and trying to give clarity to, not trying to interpret it. I mean, there's a lot of very helpful advice on the gov.uk website, but trying to interpret it for what it means for us, because I don't want to deliver ambiguity to our staff. I want to be clear about what they can do, what they should do. The ones who are still working at home, I want to make sure that they don't feel left out, because if, for example, if you're an employer and you have staff with young children who may not go back to school until September now, they will have been out the game for 6 months. Meanwhile, the ones who have been still going in, depending on what department they're in or whatever, are going to have carried on. And it's going to be very, very difficult. Those people are going to feel ostracized almost.
Yeah. It feels so, I know I keep saying I'm struggling. It just feels so different, because the primary schools went back on Monday here. I read up just before I spoke to you, but like all sport is allowed if you can keep a 1.5 meter distance. So there's no football, obviously, or any tackling or contact sport, but tennis and all of that, and it just feels like, well, that was a weird 2 months, wasn't it, lads?
I wonder, like, from a creative point of view for you, has it given you any sort of inspiration to, it sounds like you've got a lot going on with the job and stuff, but to write and to pursue, whether it's a book or some longer form journalism? What's been going on, the unprecedented nature of it all?
I've been saying I'm going to write a novel for the last 15 years.
Join the club.
Yeah, exactly. And I said to my friend Corinne, God, I'm going to come out of lockdown and I haven't written my, Pulitzer Prize winning novel. And she was just like, oh, this is the worst time to try and put yourself under pressure to do something magnificent. And I think a lot of people, I have been through periods of having a lot, like no work and loads of work. And during those periods of no work, I still didn't write a novel. So I'm not going to write a novel during a period of no work and a pandemic. And I haven't learned Dutch, and I haven't done all of this stuff that the dream. So creatively wise, I've had some ideas, but no, I haven't put myself under that kind of pressure to produce during a time of like horrible anxiety. Have you?
Well, I mean, fortunately for me, work's been pretty consistent, but I can live on my own, so it's not like I don't have time to write as well. And a bit like you, I haven't really. Once you fill in like working, so it's writing, so it's not like a set 9 to 5 pattern, but the volume of stuff that I've been asked to write hasn't changed. So when you fill in like Zoom calls with your friends and exercise and go in the shops, and my world's definitely shrunk. But really, time-wise, like you, really, I found that quite relatable. I still haven't managed to find that extra couple of golden hours to get cracking on my attempt at the Pulitzer Prize. So short answer is no, not really. Like I have had time to listen to music in a way that I probably haven't done since I was a teenager. So I listen to whole albums.
That's cool.
Yeah, rather than just skipping from track to track to track, and just get probably an appreciation of one record as it was intended. Do you know what I mean? Without sounding too wacky. Or I've read a bit more and I've watched a bit more Netflix, whereas normally I just say to people, yeah, I'll watch that. Yeah, no, I will. I'll watch that. And I never, there's maybe one or two things I'll watch.
That's really interesting, Macro. Because
I'm taking all these incremental gains.
But they are gains. I think listening to music and appreciating a record is one of the books I wrote is about mindfulness and being present and just enjoying the moment, and and I do really believe in that, and I think that is just as valuable than trying to put yourself under huge pressure to write your Pulitzer Prize winning novel. Like, I just think actually spending time doing stuff you enjoy and enjoying it, rather than, I think before lockdown, I would watch a Netflix series or read a book and I'd be sitting there going, oh, should be writing my Pulitzer Prize winning novel, or, you know, I should be learning Dutch. And you feel guilty for enjoying your time. And actually, I think it's really nice that, you know, I suppose, as you said, and some of my friends have said, you know, actually just going, oh no, I'm going to spend today reading a book, and being like, nice. You know, it's lovely. I think that's really cool.
It is great, isn't it? Like what you were saying there was very interesting, Greg, because like we do live in this world. We spoke about it a lot in the podcast before, about instant gratification and stuff like that. And maybe that could be one of the things that as a society we come out of a little bit better, and we do live in the moment a little bit more. It just becomes more natural to us to live in the moment.
Yeah.
Hope so. Yeah.
I also hope that we cut ourselves some slack. I really think, well, you guys will understand because you work for yourselves, is the constant treadmill and the constant pressure and the constant should be doing this, should be doing that, and I feel like quite a lot of that responsibility has been taken away, and I for one am actually putting less pressure on myself. I know some of my friends aren't, and are really punishing themselves for not having done all this stuff. But I do hope, like you say, that maybe we will take more time to speak to our friends and do all the things that we have spent lockdown doing. And yeah, reading, listening to music, and, you know, listening to podcasts. Hey. But you know what I mean? I just think that's totally valuable.
You got any recommendations for us podcast wise? What have you been listening to?
Oh my God, I'm into serial killers. So all of the serial killer podcasts.
Have you listened to Serial?
Yes. Done Serial, loved it. Criminal, brilliant podcast. It's by Phoebe Judge, who's got the nicest voice in the world. Her voice is so wonderful. During lockdown, she started reading a chapter of a mystery novel a day. Oh, just put it on and go to bed. It's Phoebe reads a mystery. But her criminal podcast is, she takes an unusual angle on crime. So she'll interview the person who works in the, oh my God, I've totally forgotten, like the executioner in American states where they still have the death penalty. Like, she'll interview the person who does the executions and gets the kind of background info, or the girl who committed fraud and accidentally, you know, or stole £12 million. She'll interview her. And yeah, that's a brilliant podcast. Gets a totally different perspective. That's my top recommendation. Apart from yours, obs.
You give us a shout there inadvertently because you said the word perspective, so that'll do us.
Yeah.
Well, Jo, listen, it's been wonderful catching up with you. Thank you so much for your time and your honesty, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nice one.